descent has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You have entered Untold Radio AM. And now broadcasting from a secret location, your hosts, Joel Sturgis and Doug Highcheck. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Doug Highcheck. We're doing it to it the only way we know how. Fast and loud and fun.
How come he always puts me on? And that, the big, like that. He does this.
Do not know.
And then you're talking in the little box.
I'm okay with the little box, though. I'm okay with that.
I want to be in the little box.
You are now. You're the man in the little box.
Yeah, keep me there. Oh, my God. What a day.
Really?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Same
What
here.
happened?
What a day.
What happened? Well, right up to the last minute, we had to switch guests, as you know.
Yeah.
I had to call Charles to see if he could switch with Mike. And they did. They both switched, which is great.
Can't go wrong with either one of them, man.
No.
They're A-game performers. So,
No,
I mean,
Charles will be a delight. The guy actually, I met Charles online and we were just typing letters back and forth. And he was so quick to respond. And he would charm me with these intelligent answers. And I thought, who is this guy?
was a real Harry Met Sally moment for you.
Well, yeah. It was
as
a
long as it didn't
moment.
have the diner scene, we're all good.
Exactly. It was no.
Alex got it. Look at that. He's like, I get that.
Have
now.
you seen that movie, Alex?
Oh, I've seen every movie.
Oh, okay.
He is like,
I think she
backup.
she pretends to have an orgasm in the diner, right?
yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I've seen, yes.
Yeah,
I've seen that movie.
yeah.
Come on.
Little known fact, Alex's brain is actually the backup hard drive for all the archives of Congress.
What?
So everything that's ever happened in the history of man is in his brain. It's his archive.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah.
That's how I saw it.
It was weird because he's
in
bringing
there.
up like
The
naming.
Library of Congress is right there.
He was naming football players from when 19 what? And
That's
some
right.
high school football team.
I remember
Yeah, in diapers.
1921, Crazy Joe Shoe came out of the field.
Anyhow, but Charles is basically, I just like to think of him as a historian, a reporter, historian, researcher. He's just kind of everything.
Very cool.
He's
I
very
look forward
cool,
to it. I look forward to talking to him.
Yeah, they will
Like
never
he
get-
says, I was going through his stuff there and he, last minute looking at what he's doing. Oh my good Lord.
Yeah.
It is going to be a very interesting show. Buckle up, folks. You paid for the whole seat, but you only need the edge.
Yes. And if you're listening to this on Apple or some other format, please leave a comment, a favorable comment. So people
Favorable?
can find us.
I'd just be happy with them. Yeah, they're all right.
Well, whatever. That's
Good
that's
enough.
favorable. Good enough?
They're mediocre.
Okay. Anyhow. Oh my God. So I was reading about a couple. Listen to this. You remember the Darwin Awards?
I do.
Alex, have you
I
ever
do.
heard of the Darwin Awards?
Yes.
That's where basically it's kind of a joke. People that die in really dumb ways. And the joke is you kind of rid the gene pool of their
It's natural selection at its finest is what
Yes,
it is.
exactly. So I'm reading about this couple who died from electrocution while attempting a viral crafting technique called fractal wood burning. And I'll explain what it is as long as you promise Joel to try it tonight.
You're going to go first.
Okay. Anyhow, I'm just joking. All right. So what they do is you basically get like a transformer from a microwave oven.
Oh, this sounds great already. Yeah. What could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, and the idea is to probably, I think they get your voltage up into the millions.
I bet they do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you soak wood in a toxic chemical.
Again, this is just getting better as we go.
And then you basically blast it with lightning bolts
Good Lord.
from the transformer that's producing 10, 20, 30 million
This
volts.
sounds like a toy you might have had in your youth.
Yeah, well, I did stuff like this. I'll tell you about one story. Anyhow, and then they burning the wood and just creating this basically like lightning, a fractal design into the wood burning.
Sure.
Okay. Well, do you realize that 36 people have died trying to do this?
No, not until just now, since you told me.
Oh my God, this is not good. So don't try it. I mean, just don't do it, because one little mistake and you are dead. Don't do it. Okay. Yeah, it's just, apparently it went viral, and who knows. And so my heart, my thoughts really go out to the families that lost loved ones doing such, basically, I don't know, what would you call it? A dumb thing?
Being stupid.
A dumb way to die. Yeah, it is.
You seen that show, 1,000 Ways to Die?
Yes, Spike TV used to carry it back in the day.
It's a whole show of Darwin Awards.
Oh, okay. They have so basically the Darwin Awards officially are worded something like this. It's in honor of those who tip chlorine into our gene pool. Get it? Chlorine into the gene pool by accidentally removing their own DNA from it during the spectacular climax of a great idea gone wrong. Usually they do more than one dumb thing before disappearing from the planet in a head-shaking feat. So I'm reading, I haven't read the Darwin Awards for years. The last time I read it was when there was a guy that welded a JATO rocket.
That's right, the JDAM rocket. Yeah.
Onto the top of his his Chevy Caprice.
Yep.
And somehow got it ignited in a JATO rocket. I don't even know if that's pronounced right. Is it JATO rocket? JATO rocket? I thought it was JATO.
But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right. But anyhow, it's to help
rocket.
These big bombers take off, Alex.
Yeah.
They basically strap on these big, what are they? Chemical powered rockets. And then they ignite them, and then they give them a boost so they can take off with this huge payload, right? So apparently some guy stole one and welded it onto the roof of his Caprice. And the reason they know this, because the sheriff found skid marks on the road that went like a mile on the highway. Skid marks. The guy had his brakes on. And then he saw, as I remember the story from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a car embedded into a cliff way up, like 200 feet up in the air. That was the start of the Darwin Awards, as I remember.
I like their catchphrase, Darwin Awards, evolution through action.
Yes. Okay. So I was reading about one where a guy is on a boat with another guy. The boat starts sinking. So they're smart. They call rescue. They call the sheriff and get Coast Guard to come out and rescue them. Bring them back to shore. They're safe. Everything's good. All good. No. So the one guy thinks, oh, I'm going to talk another boat owner to bring me out to the sinking boat because I can go get my shit.
Yeah, I can just go get my stuff.
Yeah. So he does. He goes out there, but he doesn't have a life jacket on. Well, he goes out there. He gets off the good boat onto the sinking boat. And of course, the boat capsizes. He's on it and he drowns.
Oh, no.
So that's a number of mistakes, Alex. It's not just one. There's a number that goes in there. If he would have had a life jacket, he would have been fine. Again.
True.
But he made 2 mistakes. So for all the young people out there listening, you do need to go to the Darwin Award and read the stories, because they will make you think and go, oh, yeah, that time I needed to install a TV antenna. I probably shouldn't have done it in a lightning storm.
You might not want to do that. No.
Things like that.
Yeah, and you have a problem if half the ideas on there. You're like, yeah, I've thought about doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of them aren't really so obvious. So the student, he gets his permit or his license to fly aircraft. And you have to solo in your own aircraft, whatever the aircraft he's going to fly. he gets his temporary license, which has got restrictions, no passengers. You have to fly the craft that you were licensed in. So the first thing the guy does, he goes and buys a new aircraft.
Oh, that's smart.
Takes off. He lasted 4 minutes.
4 minutes?
4 minutes. Yeah. It's a Darwin Award winner.
Yeah, but we have one that just happened. It's the water bottle one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, did you know I had that written down?
I'm on the Darwin Award website.
Oh, okay, yeah. He breaks in, right? He breaks in, and then he gets thirsty, Alex, and he decides that he needs a drink of water, and there's this big tower of avian water. So he grabs a bottle from the bottom, pulls it out, and of course this tower of heavy water tipped over on him, and the crews, the cleaning crews found him the next morning dead.
Oh no.
Not the way to go, eh?
He paused to enjoy a drink of water, pulling the bottle from the top.
No,
he toppled on. Oh, from the bottom rather, and it toppled down on him.
Yes,
like a tidal wave. It says.
Oh,
employees returned to the shop the next day, and they were confronted by a collapsed mess of crates.
Yeah.
A few hours into the workday, they finally began to sort out the collapse. Lifting the stacks up, the first thing that they were amazed to see was an arm. Uh-oh, we got problems. It was immediately clear that what had happened.
But don't you realize it was 2 mistakes? He broke in. That was one mistake.
That is true.
And then the second one was doing the water.
And I just want to take time to say good evening, everybody, and thank you for all the good evenings in the chat room, by the way.
Yeah. Oh,
and I am maybe going for that Squatch look. I haven't decided yet.
Oh, sure. You should do the ZZ Top. I just saw a documentary on those guys. Pretty amazing.
They were amazing, or they are amazing. I think we lost one of them, of course. But the other
was it Billy?
Yeah, I think it was Billy we lost.
Yeah. Yep. Anyhow, I got to meet one of them, and I don't remember which one it was at SEMA.
The one with the beard, right?
Well, they both had beards. It was so many years ago.
Could have been both of them.
But it was at SEMA. Okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to think here. Oh, and then there was a couple of teenagers.
Fun fact, the drummer's last name is Beard.
Yeah.
It's food for thought.
Yeah, it was Beard. So they were definitely meant to get together.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Okay. So another couple of guys that met their demise were people who were going to jump a drawbridge and decided at the last second in a Chevy Cruze.
In a Chevy Cruze, the next to no horsepower Chevy Cruze.
Right. We're not talking a 454 V8, Blues Brothers cruiser here.
So did it almost get to 60?
I doubt it even. The guy actually, while it was going, his buddy decided, hey, I'm going to get in. So
why not?
While the thing's moving.
Well, it was going a solid 7 miles an hour on its way to 12.
Yeah, exactly. Can anybody guess what happened to them? They drowned.
Oh, I would imagine.
They didn't have life jackets.
No. Anyhow,
well, they didn't think that far ahead.
Enough of that crud.
Okay.
That's just bad. Anyhow,
there's nothing wrong with having a little continuity in a show.
I did a weird promo for Untold Radio and posted it this morning. I was just on Buffalo.
Yeah.
That's it. Just Buffalo.
You just ranted about Buffalo
I just kind of went into a rabbit hole on Buffalo in the early morning hours and edited in a video. And put it up. Oh, here it is. What this has to do with Untold Radio, I have no idea, Joe.
Well, I guess nothing, but it's interesting about Buffalo.
Yeah. I just thought, well, it is kind of like Untold Radio.
Did you ever have the urge, Doug, to pet a buffalo?
No.
Oh.
I didn't want to end up in the Darwin Awards.
That's true, too.
Bison can leap 6 feet in the air, turn on a dime, apparently, because to avoid predators. Throw you. How many feet have you? We've all seen YouTube videos.
Hey, did you see that video from last year? That lady in South Dakota, she learned really quick not to miss a buffalo. Those bikers, they stopped on the side of the road.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And we've all done the Custer State Park, where
Of
you're
course.
you got buffalo roaming around your car. Alex, have you been to Custer?
I have not.
Got to do it. Got to do it. It's just, I don't know. It's just a drive through. It's a state park. It's pretty.
Yeah, and while you're at it, go see Mount Rushmore because you're right there.
Yes, you're Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
So I'll do weird things like Joe. I'll just get in my car and say I'm going to Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
I've done that more than once. I'll just like get this urge. It'll be like 11 o'clock at night, and I'll just go. I've done this several times.
And you'll just take off.
I'll just take off.
That could be the beginning stages of, well,
Yeah.
never mind.
But I've been doing
Wandering
it.
away, Alex. Wandering
What?
away.
I used to do it. I used to do it the last second you just drive to Florida.
Just
Wouldn't even plan it. I just
jump
say,
in the
"Hey, I'm gonna
car,
go
not
there."
pack one thing, just leave.
Well, I'd throw something.
Well,
I
you
just
know what I'm talking about. It's not like you went upstairs and packed a proper
No, just
bag and
no
did this
planning.
and planned it. You
No
just got in the car, said, screw this, I'm going to Florida.
Yeah,
I don't know this damn snow.
yeah.
Drove to
I did
Florida.
that last time I went to South Dakota too. I realized it was Sturgis, and I'm like, oh dear, I want to go. So I just went and started looking for accommodations on the way there. But I left at 11 o'clock at night and drove all through the night and got there early in the morning.
And then what'd you do? Get out, go, that's
I
interesting.
took
Turn
my
around, come
4-minute nap, my usual.
Your 4-minute nap. Yeah.
Took my 4-minute nap. Felt
Maybe
great.
did a video about some odd things.
Went out I stayed in Deadwood and went out on the street. Right away, there was a motorcycle coming down the street with a deer running in front of him. A white-tailed deer or mule deer running in front of the motorcycle.
Running.
Down Main Street, yeah, in Deadwood.
Well, you never know what you're going to see in Deadwood.
And that's where I hit the grouse. I hit a grouse and its head popped right through the grill as like it was looking out, like doing peekaboo. And I pulled into a McDonald's and everybody's at the window laughing at me. They're all pointing and laughing. I'm like, what's so funny? So I go in there and I go, what's so funny? And they keep pointing to my car. And I look and there's this grouse, just his head sticking out of the grill.
like almost like a hood or
Right in the middle. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
right in the middle. I don't know how we even got in there.
Who knows?
Through a little hole. As big.
It was dead, right?
No, it was alive.
It was still alive?
Heck yeah. I pulled him through.
Yeah, but,
I
my
had
God.
to. Well, I had to. I couldn't
Doug,
leave.
we got a question.
What?
About Easter?
Yes, I did.
The
I
Erie
set 3
survived.
timers. 3 of them.
Did you tell her that? Or did you hide that from her?
No, I waited till she was gone. And then I did it. But I set 2 timers. That was good. No issues. So anyhow, the grouse. Anyhow, I pulled them out. I don't know how we got in there. I had to use both hands.
Was it cooperative, the grouse?
He came out and he was still alive through that little hole. It's probably a 1 inch by 1
My
inch.
gosh.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
Their bones just must. There was a YouTube video I saw like a week ago of somebody doing that with an owl. The owl was fine. He flew away.
See, now I wouldn't want to do the owl because they have talons.
No, I know.
They will rip the holy hell out of you.
Yeah.
The grouse, not so much. But
No,
owl,
I wasn't.
things
grouse.
get real.
But man, you don't want to leave him in there.
No. God, no. Then you had
I
a
figured
grilled
either way,
grouse.
he's going. He's coming out of my grill.
Well, what do you do?
I don't know. I pulled him hard.
Well,
While the whole crowd in McDonald's was laughing.
Which vehicle was this?
It was a Ford Flex.
So there's not much of a grill there then. You're right.
No, it was like
It's very close
1 inch
together.
square holes. It was perfect right in the center.
Wow. And it was sitting there commenting on what you're doing to it
Yeah. It
as you're
was
pulling it. Yeah.
fully alive.
Yeah. People were probably laughing and taking pictures.
Well, yeah, I'm sure I made their whole day.
I'm sure it did. And not much happens.
That was when I stopped for breakfast too, because I was really tired. I needed that 4-minute nap.
Well, yeah, you need that 4-minute nap
hungry.
after driving, what is it, 8 hours
10, 11.
from where you are to,
hours,
yeah.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever ask, well, where the hell did Doug go?
Yeah. Actually, it was a couple days before anybody realized I was gone.
They're like, where'd he go?
It was a couple days. I think it was 2 days, day and a half. Nobody knew I was
I did
gone.
that once. I drove to California
Yeah.
on a whim. Just like, I'm sick of the snow.
Gold Rush?
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna go hang out the beach for a little while. And they won't let you hang out the beach that long though. It's not like they show on TV where you can live on the beach.
Right.
That's a bunch of bunk. That doesn't happen.
No,
not legally anyway.
I think in California they do now.
Maybe now, but not then.
Joel brought his tent.
I did. I brought my tent. I was gonna move in. Had a whole plan.
Beachfront property.
Yeah, I had a little guitar. Just didn't work out for me.
Yep.
Speaking of the beach, I think a lot of people want to know how the Dougie boat is doing.
Oh, the janky boat. It's done.
Yeah.
Ready for launch.
How's Dougie's Ark?
It's completely done.
It's ready for
How narrow that thing is.
Oh my God.
That's gonna. Yeah, the seats are bigger in the boat.
Yeah.
I got in and my knees were hitting the railing.
Who are you recruiting to go on the maiden voyage with you? I think Alex should go with you.
No, I think Blaine's willing to go.
I could see Blaine going.
Blaine wants one.
Yeah, he does. I think he wants to go on mine first. Then we'll build him one for him.
I think that's a great idea. I think you guys should go on Lake Superior.
Lake Superior.
Why not?
Let's do it right. What time is it? Oh, okay. So the other thing I was reading about today was basically how the world is connected. Like they put wolves in Yellowstone, and all of a sudden, they put them in there to get the deer populations down, was one of their arguments. And then all of a sudden the forest started growing back. The hills greened up, the streams ran clear again, and all sorts of other animals began multiplying and thriving because they brought the wolf back.
Yep.
Yep. People, we do not have the earth figured out. If you're one of these people that think, we're just going to raise taxes on gasoline and suddenly the climate's going to be all good. Oh my God, it's so much more complicated than that.
I'm telling you, the climate, it's been odd this year. I mean,
it has, but we don't understand it. Nobody does.
No one does it.
Science.
No one understands it. We hit an all-time low of like 13 degrees last night for this late in April.
Yeah, exactly.
It is very cold.
Yeah.
It is very, very cold.
Yeah.
It's coldest spring I can remember ever in my whole life, actually.
Yeah. It's been a long, long time.
Joel, you realize that in June, there's basically 1 month to go before we're halfway through summer.
Right?
Which is only a month away.
I know. I like summer, but I'm probably working that week.
Yeah. Witty. That's pretty witty, Joel. But anyhow.
Well, thank you.
But I was reading about whale poop. Ever heard about whale poop?
I've never thought to myself while I was Googling things, hey, you know what? I'm curious about whale poop.
Why not?
How many pounds does that thing weigh? Because Johnny Depp needs to know.
Well, I don't know. Whale poop is good to read about. I mean, it's really valuable. They make perfume out of it. If you can find a floating whale poop, you could get rich.
Oh. Too bad it wasn't.
Don't you have any fart noises, Alex? You probably don't, do you? You can't afford them, Joel.
You
can't afford the royalties.
We just burned through our budget right there.
Oh my God, too many royalties on the fart noises. Anyhow, so whale poop, it's very valuable. I'm not joking you.
I would assume it is.
It's so valuable. I think that me and Alex should go try to find some.
You guys should in your new lone dinghy that you have there.
Yes, but anyhow, okay. But the whales, when they dive deep, it says, right? And they stir up the oxygen and they bring down oxygen to the real depths.
Sure.
Oh my God, nice seagull effect.
Man, we're sparing no expense this show. Let me tell you.
No. Anyhow, I'm trying to talk here and you got seagulls blaring. So the whales, they dive deep, they churn up the oxygen and the nutrients, right? And then they poop down there, and it, fertilizes the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
It nourishes the whole food chain.
It does. See?
If you get rid of the whale, for all we know, the whole ocean will die.
Right.
Whales.
Right.
Yep. But we've already killed 70% of them, so there you go.
Well, we need their blubber.
Well, yeah, you do. You're probably still using blubber oil lamps.
Sure, why not? No, not anymore. Oh, yeah. Gotta love that oil lamp.
Anyhow, I don't know. I think people should research whale poop. It's there's a lot more to it than what I've talked about.
Yeah? Yeah, I will get right on that.
We'll ask Charles about it.
Oh, yeah. We can definitely ask Charles about Will.
He probably knows everything about whale poop.
He might know everything.
Yeah.
I don't, personally.
Alex, he's got a blank stare on his face.
He does? He can't believe we went to whale poop.
What is my father talking about now? Oh, my God. He's embarrassed. Oh my God.
Oh my good Lord.
That's the worst ever. Don't ever want to hear that one again.
Oh, that was a good one. Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what? That sounds like you though, Joe.
What does? Which one?
Effect. I can't tell them apart.
Yeah.
This is your voice. I swear to God they used you.
They might have.
For that
There
sound
was
effect.
that time I was doing a sound effect track for people. Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
That is indeed a whale of a story, compelling and rich.
Anyhow, so once again, just so people know, we've swapped Charles Kader with Mike, right? I can't pronounce his name, Rick Secker from Ancient Aliens.
Yep.
He also wrote a book on shadow people. We just swapped them to. So Mike will be on next week. So we're sorry. Sorry for the confusion. It's all Alex's fault, not mine.
You got a demerit now.
I'm joking.
A demerit, Alex.
It wasn't either of our fault. It wasn't anybody's fault.
Except Joel's.
Yeah, it was definitely my fault.
Might have been Joel's. Well, let's go to break and then we'll bring Charles on. Huh?
Yeah. Let's do this, man. Let's do this.
All right, 1 second here.
Takes him 1 second to go to break. We just lost 1 second. He's back.
What's going on here?
Short break, Alex.
Okay, and we're back. And we're having Charles Chaz Kader, and he's an investigator of the unknown. He is both a historian and a reporter of all things weird. Also note, Charles is a member of the Mohawk Turtle Clan and lives on the St. Regis Native North American Reservation, riverfront community on the St. Lawrence River, where the provinces of Ontario and the Quebec meet. His unique Native American perspective on the paranormal is priceless. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you. How are you tonight, gentlemen?
We are doing well. And I see by the looks of it, you are a nice beachfront property. Look at that. My God, I wish I were where you are.
Looks good.
It's a great place to live.
Yeah.
Did you actually live on the St. Lawrence Seaway, Charles?
Yeah, that's correct. It moves right along every day. Plenty of water. Generates a lot of electricity.
And you realize there's sharks in there.
There's sharks to a certain point. That's what Monster Quest has educated me on specifically.
But the biggest question, Charles, is this. Is there any whale poop?
Yeah, the whale regurgitation, it's called ambergris, and it is very valuable.
Okay, stop. So I got poop mixed up with vomit.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you read Moby Dick, it's in the real small print. But the whale oil was used for the lamps, ambergris, perfume, and just a uncommon resource that the whales do. I don't know of any other species that puts that out, that it could be used for commodity.
Okay, two things. I'm amazed, number one, that he knew that. I really am amazed. This man is smart.
Oh, I know.
We're going to have a lot of fun next hour and a half. This man's a genius.
Okay, but
number two, I'm amazed that is worth something. That regurgitation is actually monetary.
Look it up, dude.
I've never heard of it in my life.
Big
Very
money.
cool. I learned something today.
Big money. That's what I'm going to do when I retire.
You're going to be making whale puke?
I'm just going to be looking for whale puke. It's a simple job.
I just don't know what to say. Doug, good luck.
But Charles, so whale poop doesn't have any value. Is that correct?
I haven't heard anyone bidding on any, but we could start a market if there's enough hope.
Well, tell us about the fishery on the St. Lawrence. I mean, is it a real vital river with a lot of fisheries and wildlife?
Yeah, there's invasive species warning this past week. The tench fish, TENCH, not the one that'll jump into your boat as you're fishing, but this one does tend to take out a lot of the smaller fish that are, the eggs of it. And so there's a lot of invasive species. We have a tremendous amount of container ships that go through, and then their bilges, they purge those, and it brings the species that are living there inside their hull for a while. And that's somewhat how the some of the mussels there that were invasive species in the 80s and 90s the zebras became part of that ecosystem. So it's a real concern. But when you look at the construction of the seaway, that really changed the ability for some things to swim upstream and not be seen. There were Nazi submarines even that made it into higher ends of the St. Lawrence. And so the thought about sharks getting this far up, every April 1st, there's usually a story that a shark was seen by one of the container fish or container ships. I've got friends on the territory that have worked on the river for generations, and they recall porpoises or dolphins that would sort of lead the way for some of these container ships. This is in the late 60s, early 70s. So there is a lot of discussion about those animals that haven't been categorized by the organizations that are studying them. I've been a little bit of a pain to some of these organizations asking about anything that would be unusual to them. They're real tight-lipped. They just don't want to share the information. And I'm not trying to lead the question, but it does kind of end up with some, I would describe them as pregnant pauses before they complete the negative response. But at least it makes them think about it for some moments. And again, the Greenland sharks there at the mouth of the St. Lawrence are really probably our closest memories of the issues related to brackish water, like the bull sharks, where there can be a little bit of a mix, but when you go too far in, then it messes the oxygen content up for the animals.
Gotcha.
Now,
so that is the question. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. What species of shark is is like a bull shark? You answered that for us. So bull sharks, as we know, can live to some degree in fresh water.
They can, like Mozambique there in Nicaragua. They're quite aggressive, the bull sharks, and it's just because they've adapted to that mix of the brackish water. If I could just add this about the unknown wildlife near the territory here where I live, there's discussions of eels that have not migrated to the Sargasso Sea annually. And because of that, they're sterile, and they begin to develop large size. And they're not only in circumference of the body, but the length. And so there are a few discussions about unknown serpents in direct relation to Quebec on the Quebec part of the river. And it has to do with these serpents, which may or may not be eels, which have themselves adapted to the environment.
How big are we talking, these eels?
there were guys that ran cigarettes across the river, and they would be using skidoos there, sea-doos, excuse me,
Mhm.
there on the river, and would hit the things at night and fall off the sea-doo. So they were large enough to take an impact and not be moved by it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys that have passed on now, but they were really firsthand witnesses to this. And some of them were very serious about that part of their experiences.
Mhm. You know, not to put words in your mouth, but I'm just kind of curious. How many times do you think that one of these eels, these sterile, large, almost just going against nature eels, are mistaken for sea serpents?
It has to be close, except for the length on the back end of them is not what you would expect with a snake.
Okay.
So they are a little stubbier, but I guess if there's more adaptation. Now, we have 3 EPA Superfund sites within 15 miles of the reservation, and they were all upstream. And one of the aspects of the PCB infiltration of the ecosystem is gigantism.
Mhm.
So you
Mhm.
saw that with some of the muskie, with the
Yeah.
northern pike.
Yep.
And it may have even affected the sturgeon because they are themselves bottom feeder fish. And the sturgeons, of course, have been speculated as some proxy for some of the other animals that haven't been identified in certain lakes.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah, I've heard that before. That because sturgeon, by nature, are already really good at getting big, for lack of a better term. Because I remember seeing sturgeon the size of fishing boats in those pictures that we've all seen over the years. So we all know that these animals have the ability to just keep growing and
Yeah,
growing.
yeah.
Sturgeon
No, I mean, look at
especially.
what, 12 feet, Joe? 12
Yeah, they get very big, very
Yeah.
big, and very
That's
girthy too.
one
And
fish
the-
I've never caught.
and then I have to add the power supplies because of the power dam there. We've got high voltage wires that are all over the place. And that may also be creating some electromagnetic, electro something fields
Mhm.
that may have an effect not only on unidentified aerial phenomenon, but also unknown hominid or unknown bipedal creature sightings in this general area here in the industrial breadbasket of New York.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, have you experienced a lot of Bigfoot sightings and UFO activity along the river where there's been sightings upstream?
In July of 2021, there was a sighting with a friend of mine as the eyewitness.
Mm.
And it was in an area that I wasn't aware geographically that it was as close to some other sightings that I've received word of. And his sighting involved something moving across the road in front of his vehicle. There was another vehicle in the other lane that was just passing a little further back. So there would have been 2 eyewitnesses to this. He was much closer, my friend, and he said it looked like the arms were kind of connected to the legs, and there was a circular motion, and it just boogied right across the road.
Mhm.
Now there's some water sources right there, and there's also a lot of howling in the woods in that specific area. It's right off of a like a side bay of the St. Lawrence River. There must be a lot of Border Patrol sensors there because it's a hotbed for this area here for technology on the border, electronic fencing. And later on, and with some digging, we found there was sightings reported within a half mile of that area, going back 10 years, described as an elephant moving around in the bush here. Wilson Hill is the area that has been approximated on the land next to this river bay that we're talking about.
Well, we'll go into some detail. What do you mean an elephant? Elephant sized or something that actually looked like an elephant?
There was recordings of a gentleman that lived there, and he repeatedly heard disturbances behind his house. And I would call it a light brush, swampy area, kind of low to the ground.
Mhm.
There was a lot of flooding when the St. Lawrence River went through there were villages that were lost. And so you have a lowland area that's only been that way for probably 60 to 75 years now.
So it's a fairly new expansion.
It might be. And again, there's unidentified aerial phenomenon because the power lines run right along this same area. So it's really hard to separate it. But this individual, his name's Jack, he's had conservation officers, he said, visiting his property, and they've all heard the sound. And when he said, do you want to go back there and take a look? They remained at the front of the house.
They got cold feet. I don't blame them. I'll take your word for it. Not a problem.
Crazy. So this thing crossed the road, and you said it was like a circular motion.
That's correct.
Go
Yeah,
into
and
detail?
it went from right to left on our radio dial. And it was, the gentleman said he was traveling approximately 65 miles an hour.
Oh.
It was approximately 11 p.m. on a clear night. And the animal was in a relative equivalent speed that he was traveling. There was no chance of him hitting it, but it appeared to be adept and adroit in its movements and very determined to cross the road. And he didn't see it once it left the road. It's sort of, there's culverts there, but there is water sources, and I've tracked the water sourcing. Although the bay is very close, the water sourcing does tend to attract more sightings, at least of the hominoid bipedal descriptions, based upon that a feature of the terrain being close by.
Very weird. So, when did you get interested in the whole paranormal thing, Charles?
My father was a World War II veteran that was a tool maker for General Electric in Erie, Pennsylvania. He worked in the aerospace division. And whether he had a security clearance or not, that never seemed to come up. But he did work with materials that intrigued me. He had an ice scraper for the windshield that said it came from a project, and he said it would never, ever dull. I still have the item. I hope maybe one day to get it analyzed. But I think a little bit of the movies that he took me to, 1975, in that era. And he just had a lot of understanding of history. So he didn't seem to push it on me, but he gave me enough thought about, is there something in Loch Ness? Is there a Bigfoot? And of course, those were such rudimentary days where people would wonder, is there only one Bigfoot?
Yeah.
So the Patterson-Gimlin film affected me really individually. I learned about cryptozoology and Fortean theory before I learned real science. So
That's
I think it could be one of those alternate teaching methods where we teach the conspiracy first, give them what they want as students, get their attention, and then you can slide the real harder science at them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but because it gives you a reason that you want to learn, you know, being curious about all these weird mysteries. It's kind of the way I learned too, I think.
And we get to In Search Of as a series, and I think the endurance of that series was it ran long enough. The production values were very good. Arthur C. Clarke was a competent writer and about anything he put his mind to. But I have to give my props to Monster Quest as our modern version. Snellgrove Lake will be one of my destination bucket list places there with the famous Northern Ontario sighting and the DNA collection that was very, very well documented. I was not let down by any Monster Quest episode at all. I taped all of them as they were first broadcast. And you know, you've heard it, Doug, over and over, that you are the latest step in that level of understanding using television as the educational medium it was designed to be. Very,
very cool to hear. Thank you. That's awesome. How much do you want? How much we send you?
Checks in the mail.
To be honest, I'm planning to move to Minnesota as soon as I can, and you won't need to find anyone else for the shop.
There you go.
I'll be there. I'll make some noise in the woods. We can do whatever you need.
Well, you have connections to Minnesota, don't you, Charles?
I do have connections. I've done some investigation there. My brother attended Bemidji State University. He used to go to the Red Lake Ojibwa Nation, had friends there. And he did a lot of fishing. He fished there on Lake Bemidji. You know, the reason the fishing is good is because the insects eat you. And my wife and I traveled through Bemidji one time because I ended up working right near Kalispell, Montana, on the Blackfeet Reservation. Of course, Flathead Lake is right there in Kalispell or off of it. But while we were driving there, we stepped out. We stayed in Bemidji for the night. And I've never been attacked by mosquitoes like that.
Oh, yeah, they'll carry you away.
It was something.
Yeah,
so,
they're amazing.
You know, there's trade-offs to you don't get something for free. And nature does get its pound of flesh or blood out of you for the same experience.
And we bitch about winter all winter long, and then summer comes and we're eating alive.
We say it's too hot.
Yep, we get eaten alive.
Yeah.
We can't win.
No.
We can't win, Joel.
No, you never can win. But Chaz, what do you think about the whole thought behind connection of the paranormal? What I mean by that is where there's Bigfoot, there seems to be UFO hotspots, stuff like that. Kind of comes in clusters. Do you believe that? Do you think there's anything to that?
I'm a little bit of a hard science person, at least to see what is engaged in that eyewitness account. But because I don't have those answers that would satisfy a lot of those witnesses to say to them, what do you really think you saw? I do tend to steer towards the interdimensional possibilities now. And it's not because I don't have another idea. Yeah. It's because I believe that we don't have a good grasp of temporal time and how we could have concurrent existence with other periods of human development. One of my favorite stories that we're kind of alluding to here is there were some tourists there in France, and they were outside Versailles, which is a cultural landmark. It's very, very well known. It's not a deserted place that you wouldn't find anyone. And they were walking through the Tuileries, which is a garden area there. And they felt that there was something changing about them. And they saw a lot of people suddenly in period dress. And they thought that this is pre-Renaissance fair era, but they felt that they were out of place in their own dress. And that they said people were looking at them. And they literally felt that they had gone back to the French Revolution time, right before the Versailles was no longer owned by nobles and had been, seized by the revolution. You also look at England, where the Roman roads are below the current level of landscaping. And when they've gone and landscaped in some of those areas or done irrigation, they'll find the Roman road was 18 to 30 some inches lower than the present level of walking surface. And there again, those Roman legionnaires were seen at the knee level walking through the earth. And if you were to add that little bit of extra to the road, they would have been walking possibly right on the road itself. So it's hard to get around that. That one would definitely be.
It's a big glitch.
A lot of time slips, a lot of echoes of the past, strange, high strangeness in that way. You're right.
And the geology has an effect as well. And you'll see that certain types of the land features may in fact be acting as crystals or storage devices, which may or may not be affected by energy sources.
It wouldn't surprise me if there's high quartz content in that area, acting like almost like a computer's memory to replay these things.
Absolutely.
Who knows? But I think most people have experienced some type of weird time glitch, even if it's tiny. They swear to God they set their wallet right there and it's gone. And then they find it in the kitchen.
Yeah, or things that just disappear. Yeah. You put it there. You did it 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
and you go back to get it, it's gone.
And you've heard my stories, and I've heard some of yours, and they're odd. So is that area around you out east? I mean, that's kind of a hotbed area for all sorts of paranormal activity. First, let's explore Bigfoot a little bit. What's your favorite Bigfoot story out there that's somewhat current?
It involves an investigation that I was personally undertook, Erie, Pennsylvania. So that's 400 miles from where I am now, but
Close.
where I grew up. And July 31st, 1966, there was a sighting at Presque Isle State Park of an unidentified aerial phenomenon that landed on the beach. Law enforcement personnel were in the area at the time, and there was a creature that was also eyewitness accounts state that it made contact with a newer vehicle that was stuck in the sand, which was the reason why all these people were here on the beach after hours. And the thing apparently scratched the top of the vehicle. They said it was a featureless gorilla of large stature. Project Blue Book did an investigation of that. There was Air Force officers came in from Youngstown. So this isn't really just a Bigfoot story, because I can't even say that Bigfoot was in the common vernacular in 1966, given the Patterson-Gimlin film was 2 years later. So there may have been some awareness of the Jerry Crew sightings from the late 50s. And I think if you were to ask me if I want to go into a time machine, I would have went back to the Jerry Crew sightings. I'm a pretty big guy, and I don't know that I can pick up a 55-gallon drum, even when it's empty, and throw it any distance, let alone some of those drums, I believe, had fuel still in them.
Yeah.
Which would have made that sighting ponderous to fake, given that there just wasn't a lot of apparatus to throw fuel drums around. And I think they made the drums a little better in the 50s than they do now.
Oh, so heavier steel, most definitely.
That sighting to me really sparks a lot of interest, much like the Kenneth Arnold sighting does with UFOs, at least in the modern era, or develops the modern era.
What's cool about that story is the one you just told is it's got both.
Yeah.
So why do you think Lon Strickler told me a story too about apparently military people showing up after a Bigfoot sighting? What's your take on that?
Well, I did a lot of investigation, and I had law enforcement connections to a retired employees of the state park. So when I began my first-person interviews with some of these figures, notable for decades of state employment service, I was steered to the neighbor who was the former superintendent of the state park at the time. And he told me, and these are very close in connection geographically to the park, so they could have been down to the park within 5 minutes of hearing the call. And when the superintendent entered the park, the park police chief handed him a loaded .45 caliber pistol through his driver's side window and said, "I don't know what's going on here, but something is, and I think you need to have this if you're going to be here in the area where the sighting was."
Yeah.
There was a substance which was found inside the landing areas where the craft apparently had landed. And this was in an era previous to some patents being known, one of them being silicone caulk. So silicone was found inside of these landing pad areas, and that was not, there had been nothing dissolved by the next morning. A photographer for the state police took photos that were black and white of the landing area and area where the car was stuck, and supposed some tracks that were there of the creature, but it's sand. It doesn't really hold the track well. And upon that gentleman's death, his widow was visited by government employees identifying themselves as U.S. Air Force, And they said they were so impressed with his photos, they would like to see them one more time. And when the widow brought those photos out, there was some distraction, and the photos left the residence.
I was going to
without her.
say, I bet you they ended up leaving with him.
They left. And I thought this might have been an idle statement, but then I talked to the son-in-law of the photographer, and he told me that this was true, and it had always been something that had irritated the family, because it was the husband had died fairly young, and he was very loyal to the United States, and they felt that he had kind of been picked clean from his own collection there of that evidence. And it's the biggest story in Erie, Pennsylvania for cryptozoology. And it's also been maligned as a hoax story. There's the Chinese lantern YouTube video that's purports to explain everything that occurred there, but the wind patterns weren't right. I'm a librarian by degree, and I worked at a college there, and on slow nights, I would go onto the microfilm collection, and I ran a full month's worth of stories, and the newspaper ran morning and afternoon editions. And for a whole month, there were sightings of things that just weren't right. And numerous law enforcement agencies identified themselves without stigma in these articles, saying further down the lake that they saw things that same night. It's a flap area because of that. And I just think that it's a blue book case. There was subterfuge, if I can use that word lightly, in the police report that I took from the Park Police Station and looked at, and they said this thing gets pawed at monthly. And there were secret markings in red pen on some of the reports, which besmirched some of the eyewitnesses who were fairly young in their own age as they saw this. And the one guy had a mistaken identity, and there was a lot of skullduggery is the word for how the case was handled. And there, to me, there's some smoke to this fire. There's more to be said about Erie 1966.
Sure. How many of these people that were near these landing sites over the years, especially in the early days, before we had a real concept of radiation, things such as this, to look for, how many of them ended up dying of strange diseases, like early onset of cancer, stuff like that might be associated with radiation exposure?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because I believe the photographer died young, quite young for his age, and was in good physical condition prior to that. I don't know that there was any Geiger counters used in that area, but as I can allude to with my father working at General Electric, there were some classified projects related to the NASA moon landings. And my father worked on one of the motors there that the moon buggy used as a propellant, and each wheel had its own motor. And,
back in the day,
he was quite proud of that.
Yeah, back in the day, Chaz, GE was a power player in the space race. You know, so really it would have been probably your father had access, or maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but they did have some very covert stuff at GE.
There's a picture on my Facebook site, on my Facebook page, under Charles Kader, and you'll see my father there in aviator glasses with a number of older gentlemen, all wearing suits that look like they came out of the X-Files first run show. And they all look like they're G-men. And my dad was pretty proud of that picture. And I guess I didn't quiz him hard enough on what he knew, but he told me pretty much what I think he was able to tell me.
Interesting. So you're also kind of an expert, a little bit of an expert, I guess, on the Coral Castle down in Florida, which is just, to me, fascinating.
How that thing was built. Yeah, that's just crazy.
There's just no way this skinny man without any equipment lifted 50-ton rocks. Can you kind of go into detail? I bet a lot of people have never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Ed Leedskalnin was a immigrant, and he was a stonemason, apparently there in his native in the Baltic region of Europe. And if you're familiar with the Billy Idol song "Sweet 16,"
Mhm.
that's based on lyrically the story of unrequited love of the Coral Castle, which was built by Leedskalnin for a girl who he had feelings for, and she never actually visited the facility. But he had taken an interest in an area of southern Florida, south of Miami, and he was using ley lines as a basis to place the Coral Castle. So it originally was about 10 miles from where it's currently located on US 1. And in moving this, he hired trucks, because I don't believe he drove. He hired these trucks, and this would have been in the 30s and 40s. And he would tell the drivers to leave the area for several hours. And the one driver came back in half an hour, and his whole truck was loaded with these blocks of coral. So Leedskalnin was using some sort of a movement process that may or may not have involved anti-gravity. And he was using vehicular parts from the 30s, springs from Ford trucks, suspension springs, or they weren't even springs; they were leaf suspension.
The leaf spring suspension.
Yeah. It was as crude as you could imagine a salvage job, and yet he changed the alignment of the Coral Castle to where it is now, because he said that the magnetic lines had shifted on him since he had originally scouted the area out. We get into some questions of sacred geometry with the Coral Castle area, because we have to look for some explanation of what he did beyond using like a block and tackle approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what brings me into this case personally, because a close friend of mine has a family member who has written a book sold in the the Coral Castle gift shop. And this was from the 80s. So he wanted me to take an interest in this, which I did. And I did the first person investigation of the Coral Castle site. And I could just see there the level of existence that Mr. Leedskalnin was living. He didn't really even use blankets. And I know it's Florida, and you could say it doesn't get that cold there.
Yeah.
But he lived in kind of a room that had nothing but, there was, Al Capone had it easier in Alcatraz than Ed Leedskalnin had living in his own Coral Castle. And upon his demise, he had stomach pains. He had someone drive him to the hospital, and he immediately then died.
He died of what? Kidney failure, didn't he?
There was massive organ failure, and he had never been one to go to the doctor. So his demise didn't lead there to be any handoff of his own story. He did do some writing, but you could almost say it was in code. He had some different views of male and female rights. I think that's a mark against some of his legacy. But lo and behold, some of these block and tackle poles, which he did use for some part of this process, ended up in Northport, Florida, which is on the Gulf Coast, and Warm Mineral Springs is the feature there. And my friend's relative ended up with these very heavy telephone poles in his backyard. Unfortunately, the man who I'm referencing there in Northport, he also passed away before I could get there. And the Coral Castle organization, privately owned now, privately held attraction, sent up a flatbed truck and recollected these heavy duty, apparently much heavier than normal telephone poles. When we get into the Northport attraction with Warm Mineral Springs, this figure, my friend's relative, sort of leads us there to my next area of understanding of mystery in Florida, which relates to the exploration of warm mineral springs, first as a scary place that before scuba diving, people didn't go into that water and feel really comfortable. There was rumors there was a Loch Ness monster and at the bottom of it. And it ended up being there. It was an aquifer that came out of ancient water sources below Florida. And there were bodies parts taken out of this by this one individual with scuba, the first guy to go in there. And there was an NBC News camera filming this excavation that he did. And he brought up what looked like it was a brain, part of a brain. And as soon as it hit the air, it turned gray and it vaporized. Wow. So there's been some dating on some of the wood there. There was aquatic funeral burial. And some of those remains may date to 10,000 to 11,000 years old.
Well, Charles, let's go back to the Coral Castle, because I'm not sure we really explained to people the fact that what this guy accomplished. I mean, he built with these giant slabs. Do you know some of the weights on some of these slabs that he used? And he put them in place and built, didn't he have a gate that you could just, it was like, what, 50 tons, and you could just touch it and it would turn?
Some of the blocks were weighed, estimated, but there was some measurements done. 10 tons was probably the highest amount.
Okay.
That was on the coral. And
it'll be about 20,000 pounds.
Yeah. And he picked some of these areas on the ley line so he could actually carve the blocks right out of the ground surrounding the site.
But how did he move them?
Constantly. Well, it goes back to this. He claimed it was because he had a mason's training from when he was younger. And he claimed that others in his village knew the same skills and taught him those skills. He used those parts from the Ford trucks and made a box which he hung on the top of these telephone poles, and apparently was able to energize this using the ley lines as that energy source. And nobody witnessed him ever levitate anything, but by implication, you would think that he did something that was extraordinary. And we can't explain it today. In Search Of did a good episode on it. But because of the nature of it as a tourist attraction, there's always been that belief that it has less of integrity to the original story. But it's been covered better in later years. And Lead Scanlon isn't as mysterious a figure as he was at one time.
Yeah.
He lived on, he would give tours of his property for a dime. And he had built a hot dog roaster that was very unique for the tourist. But this gate that Doug is talking about, it eventually wore out because of the way it was placed. But it was remarkable for the lack of engineering beyond the basic setting and the construction of the gate material itself. And everything he did was real heavy duty.
Yeah.
So you see there's a dualism there. He was a small man who apparently had an ego, but he got over the girl not coming to see his attraction, and he kind of went for it himself as far as putting himself on the map. Yeah. And I think that legacy, there's a rugged individualism was a term that they used in the Hoover administration to describe people who did things that exceeded their expectations or maybe their lot in life. And I think Ed Lead Scanlon and his work with the coral blocks, making a castle type structure, he had furniture made out of coral. If you go there at certain times of the year, you'll see the equinox. It lines up with some star finding
Well,
real basic instrumentation that he put together.
when you mention coral, Charles, don't you mean limestone, or no?
No,
Explain this coral rock. Explain the coral rock.
the coral there would have been part of the subsurface. It would have been left over from earlier times, and I don't have a date for you on that, but
Sure.
These are rocks. I mean, they're actually
they're limestone formed coral is what they are.
Oh, okay.
When Florida was part of the ocean, we're talking a difference in elevation and water levels, and just like where I'm speaking from here, there was a Zeuglodon whale skeleton found about a mile from where I'm at, and I've got sand and ants all over the place during the summer, and it's because I'm at the bottom of the Champlain Sea where I'm at here, and of course that's another topic. But Florida obviously has had different levels of water, and that goes back to that funeral society that I was mentioning, that indigenous people of that area kind of giving us a glimpse of their own lives still to this day. And unfortunately, the guy with the scuba gear, he cleaned out a lot of these bones himself. And there's an article that discusses where he was later banned from this warm mineral springs area further north there on the Gulf Coast. And the water archaeologist for Florida said, don't go in that warm mineral springs anymore. You're essentially looting graves. And what he did was he bought property close to the runoff from where the warm mineral springs was, and he pulled all sorts of fossils and other things, including bones, and he incorporated them into a fireplace in his home. And he made a skull, a human skull depiction out of these prehistoric bones.
Jeez. Well, I gotta ask really quickly, going back to the Coral Castle, Chaz, I have to get your 2 cents on how do you believe he moved him? Do you think it was reverse magnetism?
Yes, I do, because of the connection to my family, to my friend there, his relative. There's a lot going on there, but I believe that the ley lines aren't emphasized enough in terms of power sources. And just like it was the carburetors from 50 years ago that supposedly went 1,000 miles on a gallon of gas, those urban mythologies. I believe he tapped into something that has been known to all of us through water witching and dowsing, and he picked that area because it was extremely powerful. Sure. I do believe that some of that ley lines continued to overlap and shift. So if he were to come back to us now, he might say, I have to move it again because I wouldn't be able to take full advantage of those intersections there of energy coming from the earth itself.
Well, there were a couple of teenagers apparently that witnessed. They said they claimed to have witnessed his work, reporting that he had caused the blocks of coral to move like hydrogen balloons.
Like nothing.
Yep.
Like no weight at all.
Floated. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the teenagers' accounts. I go back to that truck driver who was flabbergasted that the truck was loaded in essentially half an hour, and the 4 hours was probably
and nobody there. Nobody but him.
Yeah.
Nobody there. And of course, no power sources were run in that area at that time.
And how many tons of rock were loaded on that truck?
Just on that load there, I think it was a flatbed. It was described as a flatbed. And apparently you couldn't fit any more on there based on the driver's account.
So there could have been 50,000 pounds of coral.
Yeah. I just don't know what the tolerance on the 1930s era trucks would have been.
True.
That's just amazing, though. Really, it is. Have you been there to Chaz to visit it for yourself?
I've been there. Yeah, you get a real feel to it. It's it's not like a haunting experience. I've never been to Stonehenge, but I think it would feel something similar to that. I believe that time is concurrent. We're living at the same time as our past and as our future. And I did get kind of a sense of time immemorial there. Sure. And the tour guides there are very skilled, and they don't shy away from the questions that are a little more probing, but the volume of people that they're trying to get through kind of limits a little bit of what they're actually, how far into it they're going to get. But some of them are true believers that it is a mystical place, and that Leet Skellnan had skills that we either forgot or didn't bother to remember.
So it was super interesting.
It would be really cool, Doug and Chaz, to get an after hours tour of it where you have the place to yourself for a little bit, without all the people, without everything on, just to see what if there is a difference even to the rock itself.
I agree with you, Joel, and I would go so far as to let's get a little more provocative. Take a spirit box in there, or place several spirit boxes in there with some good batteries, and so they could run all night. I'd run a lot of white noise, I think, to try to get some
to see what that coral is holding, because that coral, that limestone is notorious for holding echoes of the past as well. It's like a recorder, kind of like quartz is too. So that'd be very, very interesting what might be on there and what might be around there.
And even up in his little living quarters, it just looked like a turret in a medieval castle. And he basically was sleeping on not much more than literally chains to make the bed. I mean, he
comfort was not his long suit. Yeah, comfort was not something he was into, evidently.
No.
Yeah. So okay, well let's boogie up to Whitehall, New York. Back up to your neck of the woods, Charles. Did you ever do any of the investigations in Whitehall, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to defer to my mentors, Paul Bartholomew, who is one of our common friends. He's kept me in the loop for some of his investigations. He's really Mr. New York for everything. I know that there's some good groups around the Western New York area that are specific to Bigfoot, but Paul has done a lot of investigation, starting with the Whitehall sightings that he's most well known for. And that's come to the point that there's a Sasquatch festival in Whitehall each summer. And that's gained, it's a location tourism event. I asked Paul if he could share with us and the audience any current sightings. His latest report that he feels has some validity was in Cairo, New York, which is just south of Woodstock. Woodstock being a known town in New York, south of Albany. And supposedly Bigfoot sightings in the vicinity of a Dollar General store that had a dumpster behind the building, and then tree line immediately following the cleared area around the store. And supposedly this was in February of this year. That was a notable sighting. There were tracks, and there had been some sightings previous to this in the same general area. So Cairo, New York is the latest hotspot in New York State. And Paul's been very gracious in sharing all of his reports. He's just a true gentleman, and I owe him a lot of gratitude and personally, because he's a devoted individual.
Yeah. And have you met, did you ever meet Brian Goslin and some of the other police officers up there?
I didn't get the chance to do so, but I'm familiar with the names and I know their narratives. The interesting thing, I don't think Paul's going to stop me from saying this. I asked him to listen in tonight, is that the Gosling brothers were, I think, the most famous triplets in New York at a certain point. So when you follow some anomalous patterns, that may have been something that precedes the sighting there to their own childhood upbringing, which was otherwise unremarkable for rural farm backgrounds, that the family owned farms there.
Chaz, for people that are just kind of tuning in or might not know about the Whitechapel sightings, can you give us the nickel tour of it? What happened there?
Sure. With the Whitehall sightings, there was a golf course owner who was had taken one of his golf carts out on the greens in order to water them. He had his dog with him, and he got to where he was, turning on the hoses, and he looks and he sees something there on the green, which it's not supposed to be there. It does make movement, which the dog notices, and that begins a flap period where the creature, if we want to call it that, unknown upright hominid, bipedal hominid, was sighted near road signs. So that led to the ability to show and telephone poles, which led to an ability to measure the height of the creature. And even when I visited Paul last July in Whitehall, he said that there had been reports there within the past year or two, which in an area that spills out of the golf course. So there are some areas of escape that could have been part of this sighting. And law enforcement responded. There was New York State police that were on the field in vehicles, and there was also local police, and they definitely saw something crossing the field there. And it was entered into the police logbook. The logbook supposedly disappeared. Paul said he's seen it, and he believes it's still available. It's still somewhere. He doesn't think it's missing. There was no cover up, but it preceded an area where law enforcement agencies were less responsive to these activities in terms of giving public comment. And some of the police waited until their retirements occurred before they then began to discuss these events, stating there was other witnesses, but for the sake of privacy and collegial activity to the other law enforcement, they decided to just give their accounts.
And you're of course referring to the original Whitehall sightings, correct?
That's correct. Yes,
yeah, okay.
That's correct.
Yeah. I did get to meet Brian Goslin, Dan Gordon, and the golf course guy. Cannot remember his name. What was his name? The guy. I can see him. I know his eyesight went bad years later. But anyhow, but Dan Gordon even passed a lie detector test before Dan's passed on now.
Yes.
Yeah, which is sad. He was great. I remember how much courage it took him. He had many discussions with his wife before he was convinced that he would, or agreed to go on camera and tell his story. He really wrestled with it. I mean, he was scared. He was really scared to come forward.
And one thing worth mentioning is Dan Gordon was a neighbor of the Bartholomew family.
Yeah.
So that went back to their childhood experiences. And I asked Paul, did you see anything in those earlier years? And he said that there was nothing that stood out. But Dan was as true blue as you might find.
Yeah. Yeah, Dan was amazing. And it was interesting because Dan actually claimed to me that when the creature crossed the road in front of his car, it was emaciated. He said they could see the spine. It was so skinny, like it was injured. Because there's rumors that the Whitehall police had taken some, shots at the creature at the original spot on Abear Road.
Abear Road. That's correct.
Yep.
And as you bring some of this in, if I can drop another name of another mentor, Stan Gordon from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
he investigated the Chestnut Ridge in the 1960s and 70s, and there was a flap of supposed bipedal upright hominids in 1973. And not only was there orbs seen being actually carried by some of those creatures, there was unidentified aerial phenomenon. There was some possible interdimensional appearances and disappearances. And those are marked also by ammunition, small arms fire directed against some of these apparitions or creatures, depending on what your assessment is. And tracer fire even went there through some of these bodies, leaving no blood. And it's just unsure that there was actually anything to shoot at. But that's tends to be the pattern. If you see something you don't know, maybe you can shoot it.
If all else fails, lob lead at it.
Yeah. Super interesting. But man, there were a lot of witnesses in Whitehall back. I was there in, I think it was 2001, maybe 2000 for Mysterious Encounters. Have you ever heard of that show, Charles?
I loved Mysterious Encounters. Autumn Williams.
Yeah.
I used to watch every episode I could, and I know that you were very instrumental in those productions. Just a great IMDb background for you, Doug. And if I can drop yet another one of my friends, the late great Scott Martis.
Yeah.
When we were investigating on Lake Champlain last summer, we also went up to Lake Memphrey-Magog there in Vermont, and he spoke of you daily. So I just want you to know the impact that your work has had in inspiring others to do things. And he was from Alabama, if I can just toot Scott's horn a little, and really non-heralded for his educational background, but a self-made researcher who went out of his way to try to back up some of the statements that he made. And we lost a good one there with him last year. And
he was always so helpful and so willing to give his time. Never squawked. I mean, that guy would have given you a shirt off his back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people that miss him now. So if I can dedicate this episode of Untold Radio AM, I'd like to do it for Scott Martis.
Yeah, let's do that for Scott. Yeah. And there's been just a whole flurry of people we've lost. And I don't want to really get into a bunch of downer stuff, but some of us are getting older. We're just getting older. You know, life is happening.
Yeah.
So what about Lake Champlain? I mean, what about the echolocation is the one thing that really gets me, that, really intrigues me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I drove Scott around and we did some readings using acoustic measuring in both Lake Champlain as well as in Lake Memphrey-Magog. And I think that Lake Champlain has such a diverse coastline, 129 miles long. If you go from one point to the bottom, if you can really track it that way, it clearly has enough distance by that measurement to hide something. Is it the deepest lake? It's not, but it does have some deep spots. And if I can give credence to the research of Joe Zarzinski, who was a predecessor of the Lake Champlain research, he was a scuba diver himself, and he got into the shipwrecks that are there from the Revolutionary War, and the water is able to preserve that wood as if they just sunk. So there's something about the water itself that has a preservative quality. I know it's temperature related and oxygen related.
That's cold.
If there was a way that I would redo some of the reporting at Lake Champlain, it would be to send a lot of correspondence to anywhere there was boat launches, waterfront restaurants, anything that had contact with the water, and make a old-fashioned effort to try to correspond with the people that are there on both sides of the lake. And if you really want to get into it, let's go into Canada as well to see any of the activities that also exist for Lake Memphremagog, because that 2/3 of that lake is in Canada.
Yeah.
So the latitudes are very important. That kind of plays into some of my discussions of the eels around us. It falls into that temperate zone that Loch Ness would also be under if you were to follow the global latitudes. So it really becomes a possibility to me that it's not a contrived story. And when we get back to some of the accounts of Samuel de Champlain, it may be that he was describing Gar as the toothy monster that he witnessed in the lake. But we can't get around the fact that my own ancestors, the Ganyagahaga, the people of the land of the Flint, as well as the Abenaki people there in Vermont, they all had oral traditions related to serpents in Lake Champlain. So I believe that there's more to it than just the isolated focus of the Manzi photo. For as provocative as that is, we have a lot more to I think reach for that doesn't just involve one single photo.
Well, when was the first sighting on Lake Champlain of a creature? I mean, that in modern times. I mean, when was the first outside of the oral tradition, but when people in the modern day started seeing something strange? When was that?
I know that the fairies have been pretty persistent on the lake for 100 years. And some of those early accounts, and I like to think about this. There was no motors on Lake Champlain until really the 20th century. I'm going to say that. So a lot of those sightings that maybe were late 1800s, early 1900s would have had a lot less distraction environmentally related to humans there. I'd have to look at the timelines to give you the best answer. But I do know that it's related to the more the people were on the lake, especially under power, that there were sightings there that were more than momentarily seen.
Sure.
And if I can drop another lake that's had similar events, Seneca Lake in the Finger Lake region, supposedly one of these fairies ran over the creature that they had seen there. The whole boat was watching the creature, and it gave a last gasp before it went under the water for the rest of the sighting. I think we have some of that occurring in Lake Champlain. I know there's a lot of speculation about giant turtles that are there. I'm a member of the Turtle Clan, so maybe I'm pulling for that a little bit. I'd like to get involved with the Beaudet film. There's a lawyer that's been handling that property. It's getting to the point where the interest is probably flagged in terms of a lot of interest, although there's some good documentaries on YouTube. Carrick St. Laurent is one of my Facebook friends, and he's done a great job with that film. I'd like to kind of get some money going as a fundraiser and see if that video can be released, which apparently shows a large turtle-like creature in the VHS resolution that they filmed it in.
Well, again, what do you think, Chaz? What do you think it is? What do you think the sighting has been over the years? Or do you think that there is a population of sea monsters in Lake Champlain? Because clearly it'd have to be more than one. So we're going to talk about breeding population, or do you believe it's going to be the turtles?
Yeah, I tend to believe that the turtles are a part of that ecosystem, and they could be of tremendous size. In relation to the actual creature itself, the Manzi photo does not look per se like a turtle, but if a turtle was out of its shell, you'd be surprised at the length of some of their necks.
I would imagine, yeah.
And Scott Martis asserted that there was some breathing apparatus that could even be done during the winter that would deal with the ice. The ice is a troubling factor with the ability to have a healthy breeding population there. But again, some of the oral traditions of my own people here on the river, St. Lawrence River, say that there's connections under the ground leading to Lake Champlain.
Okay.
And I don't know how that works out glacially, because the glaciers came through here, creating the Champlain Sea, and this whole area was underwater, going up to Ottawa.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to consider about something that was stranded while it was a freshwater, or while it was turning into a freshwater body.
Well, there'd have to be some way of getting in and out of the lake to keep a breeding population, because clearly it's not a big enough lake to hide a breeding population this many years without somebody, without one washing up, without something like that happening. So there has to be some egress that they're using.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's the fact that all the bases haven't been covered yet. No one person has the best narrative. I don't believe there's any experts on lake-based creatures, because until we've actually brought one forth and treated it to zoological inquiry, that we're not going to get that full understanding. That, there I was in Montana by Flathead Lake, which is extremely clear. And I'd always hoped that Monster Quest would do Flathead Lake, because I think that, and Scott felt this as well, that he wanted to go see Flathead Lake for himself, because he thought that there was less chance of a creature hiding in that viscosity of water, as opposed to the short seasons that would be marking Lake Champlain. Now, I was at Lake Champlain 3 weeks ago, and what I saw was there was patches of ice that had separated from the shore, and there were thousands and thousands of ducks and geese, Canadian geese, on these patches of ice. And I thought right there would be a quick source of protein.
Yeah.
If you were right there hiding under the ice, or where the ice had been, that was a unique feeding experience that I thought was manifest. And those ducks stayed right next to that water, to the point that anything could have pulled them under.
Yeah.
So I was actually emboldened in my beliefs that there is something there, but is it something that's there all the time?
Yeah, that's the hard thing, though, isn't it? With water-based cryptids, is the lack of any tangible evidence that we have of them. Just because the nature they are in the water, so it makes it very problematic to come up with any type of empirical evidence.
Yeah, I'm reading Stan Gordon's latest book called Creepy Cryptids, and he mentions a Lake Erie sighting there on Presque Isle, where we just had our discussion about the UFOs from 1966, that a person saw a creature, which is the Lake Erie monsters, called Bessie, and supposedly the thing was approximately 40 feet long.
Jeez.
And he described it looked like a dinosaur. Now, I know that area very well. My friends had a houseboat there, and there's a limited number of houseboats by state law allowed on this area called Misery Bay. And there's just not enough room to really hide something of that size. So, Doug, I have to go back to the interdimensional possibilities. And it's just harder to get away from them because of the peekaboo nature of the sightings themselves.
Well, what about Dogman and some of these other cryptids? You must have some opinion on what's going on. You must have investigated Dogman sightings at some point.
I've investigated the Dogmen sightings in the sense that I know they're in Wisconsin, and I followed Linda Godfrey's work from the beginning, and the fact that she's an artist, I think, helps for her to tell the stories that she's personally heard. And I believe Linda Godfrey as a very good researcher. In New York, I haven't seen the Dogmen phenomenon as notable as they are in Michigan and possibly in Wisconsin. But what we've seen here on the territory is a deer man. And the deer man would have an upper body of a deer and the lower body of a man.
Kind of
And
sounds like a Wendigo. What people have described as a Wendigo sighting too, with the antlers.
Sure. That story has also evolved, and there's something called monkey dogs, which are notable on the Haudenosaunee territories that are both in Canada as well as here in New York.
Okay, Chaz, I gotta stop. Monkey dogs.
Monkey dogs with a human face and stooped over with the body of a medium-sized monkey.
I can see the smile a little bit on your face.
Okay, now I'm really confused.
Yeah, the monkey. You can't even say monkey dog without wanting to laugh.
Isn't that? Aren't you describing a dog man, basically?
I see a distinction in the sense that the size was much more at the like the waist height level. And
smaller?
Excuse me, Alex.
Oh, sorry. So are they smaller?
Yeah, these are smaller.
Oh,
some of them are seen as harbingers of impending events. The monkey dog sighting in the area that I'm referencing was immediately adjacent to where the deer man sighting was, and traditional people that I trust have calmly told me that this occurred. And I have some younger friends that live in that same area, and they've seen large owls. They weren't sure if they had been shape-shifted creatures. I'm not real big into shape-shifting, if we can get back to the dog men, because Tony Hillerman was a popular author in the late 90s, and that's really where the skinwalker motif comes from. So, you know, even the word Bigfoot, if we want to get into literary terms, Bigfoot was a Minneconjou Lakota Sioux chief that died at Wounded Knee in 1896, but he was known as Bigfoot. So we tend to look and see, is there any narrative forms that have evolved from actual factual activities? The monkey dog seems to be something that's a more recent occurrence, but there is still a spiritual aspect to it, much like a trickster that would be seen in some of the Western reservations.
Okay. Very interesting.
Can you relay a sighting and actually tell us about a sighting of the monkey dog?
Monkey dog. My friend was driving on a road that's been laid in with gravel. It's not paved fully. I mean, it's not paved. There's a neighborhood there, but there's quite a bit of forest. There's lacrosse fields that are right next to this area. It's off of a road called Frogtown Road. And there was something which came in February of 2019, crossed this gravel road, quickly looked at the driver with the headlights bearing down on it, and made its way across the road into the tree line there. And it's not really trees, it's more brush. And my friend had his girlfriend with him there. He lives right on the road. He'd said he'd never seen anything like that. When he went back out to take a look at maybe the area where it had crossed, because he wanted to see if there was tracks, he got out on foot. And what did he bump into was a quite tall owl that looked like it was feasting on a cat. So there's another animal it was eating on, and it spun its head all the way around. The owl did. And that freaked my friend out enough that he didn't go back out that night. So then the next day he went and he looked at where the creature had crossed the road, and there was quite a bit of disturbed snow there, but he couldn't get any sense of footprints. And although the young man is energetic about what he saw, I don't have any sense that he misrepresented what he saw. He he's sad that his girlfriend wasn't looking up. I think she was looking at her phone at the time. And unfortunately, there's another phenomenon we have of eyewitnesses, because the phones are so prevalent in everyone's possession.
Yeah.
They're not spending as much time, as Doug has said before. They're not looking up anymore.
No, it's all looking down.
But the area is lit by lights on the telephone poles, and it's not completely a hidden area. There's people go on that road regularly.
Yeah.
But have other people said that there's some activity there? There was a missing time area there. His father lives right next to him, and this has been speculated that there's a river there. And he said one night he was doing the dishes. He had the window open in the summer, and he said the area was enveloped in blackness. And while this was occurring, that caught his attention. There was also a silence that gripped the area, and it really freaked him out until later he could start to hear some noise of the water again. And then the blackness in the sky above his home disappeared. And when I mentioned this to someone who's a little less associated with the story, he said that reminded him of the day that the St. Lawrence Seaway had been dammed up. And because of the trauma of that energy change, that may have created itself a temporal time pocket that has to do with the water there. So once again, there's a connection between the eyewitness accounts and water sources.
Wow. Dang, man.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
See, somebody asked, Helton. Alex, can you put his thing up? He had mentioned somebody had reported seeing a giant turtle. That's a big turtle, 5 foot.
That's a big one.
That is a large turtle there. I mentioned Presque Isle State Park. A friend of mine's older brother was canoeing in the same area where supposedly the Bessie had come out of the lake and was kind of on the shore. This is an area with like lagoons in it. And he was paddling, and he pressed down on the paddle, and he hit bottom where he didn't think the bottom was that close. The bottom of his canoe ran over a turtle that he estimated was 4 feet in circumference.
Yeah.
And he said it could have bitten that oar right in half if it was a snapping turtle.
Yeah, it's a very large turtle.
Yeah.
Any Mothman phenomena in that area? Anything
The
like the Mothman?
Yeah, the Mothman activity, in at least from where I've investigated, has not been prevalent.
Okay.
I've tracked some of the stories. I've listened to Lon Strickler recently, and he's focused on the Chicago sightings. And when we go back to Stan Gordon's earlier works, he talks about some of the Mothman equivalencies there in Pennsylvania. Nobody seems sure that they're really harbingers of doom, although there was some mention of a Mothman type creature around Chernobyl in 1986. And without bringing any politics or world news into this discussion, I'd be most interested at this point, given the activity above in the Ukraine skies. Are they going to start seeing anything there in the skies? And also possibly in the Chernobyl area, which has been disturbed notably in the past weeks.
Yeah.
So I think that we're in for an exciting time to track some of these stories that are still going on around us, maybe closer and sometimes not so close.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your assessment of what's happening with the Chernobyl, the whole situation over there? A lot of people don't understand.
I was in the infantry in the United States Army, and we dug in everywhere that we were going to spend any time. And so the Russian soldiers, creating a defensive perimeter around there, dug right into that radioactive soil.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a significant rate of attrition, wounded, and death in those Russian army units that did this. not to mention some of the wildness of taking tank and artillery shells and trying to shoot some of these nuclear sites there in Ukraine. Maybe their science instruction isn't very good, but we would have been really vulnerable in the U.S. Army because the only thing that we really had, I was in the Army when the Berlin Wall came down. So
Okay.
I'm familiar with the nuclear, biological, chemical training that we had. We didn't have anything for radioactivity. Iodine pills would have been the extent of some of the things that we would have been able to put our hands on. Everything was about nerve agents and trying to inject yourself with an antidote before your breathing stopped.
Yeah.
But as far as Chernobyl today, that's a disturbed area, and the animals had come back apparently to some level of concentration because there was no humans there hunting them. But with the Russian incursion in that area, it'll be interesting to track if possible what becomes of those soldiers, because that may have been a lethal exercise by digging into the radioactivity.
Yeah, several of them had to leave, or actually they vacated Chernobyl because their soldiers were indeed getting sick with what was reported as radiation-like sickness. So it will be interesting to see if they release any information, the Russians.
And if we want to look at some cases that would show long-term effects of radioactivity, let's talk about Falcon Lake in Canada. The Ukraine immigrant to Canada was the gentleman there that was next to the exhaust on that one unidentified landed creature or landed vehicle. And when he touched that, it left marks on his chest that he called buttons for the rest of his life, and they would occasionally flare up. He had what looked to be radioactive sickness. Immediately after that, he threw up and he couldn't keep anything down. And there were spells for the rest of his life that involved that radioactive exposure. We could go to Shag Harbor, where the foam had come out of the water and it was a different color. There's a concern that may have been a radioactive Canadian submerged unidentified object. So we do have some indications that there is a crossover between sightings and radioactivity.
If I'm not mistaken, when they do Geiger counter research on landing zones of UFOs, it's usually present a higher than normal concentration of radiation. Am I not correct?
I believe you're right. I know that some of the original investigation teams did use the Geiger counters, but I would also say that as our fears became a little more middling, we stopped seeing a lot of Geiger counters with teams, and it wasn't until like tri-field meters started to come back where people were looking for substitutes for those devices, when I think they should have stayed with the Geiger counters right along. It's just, I don't know anyone that owns a Geiger counter today. I don't know of any of you gentlemen, but at one point they couldn't give them away at the surplus stores, military surplus stores. And now you'll probably spend a pretty good dollar to get one. And I don't think you can make an app for your smartphone to substitute for that device of measurement.
You can probably buy them on Amazon.
Yes, sir. I believe we could.
It depends on how much you want to spend.
I'll order one tonight.
There you go. You need one of those, Doug.
Yeah. Well, you have my acoustimeter.
Oh, I do. I still have that. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I'll send you up a Geiger counter too.
There you're gonna go with it. Thank you, Doug.
Oh my gosh.
You did miss my birthday.
What do you want to talk about, Charles? What's on your mind?
4 minutes. Anything you want to talk about?
Well, if I could just bring up my heritage, I'm not trying to wave feathers around or beat my drum, but my close clan brother, Gonalatiel from the Bear Clan, he's been diagnosed with COVID today.
Ooh.
So he's in my thoughts, and he's gifted me with a lot of insight. He was in a traveling troupe that went to all the colleges when he was younger in the early 70s. And here's someone that was taken out of school by his mother so that he could learn the native ways and not be going into the public school system. And they attempted to give her a hard time about truancy of her children because he's from a large family. But what they were trying to do was impress upon to the people that when they go to these colleges, the respect that can be shown to the native culture without necessarily eroding your own culture. And we're still having a little difficulty in acknowledging that the native culture is not a novelty to cryptids, to Fortean science, to any of these sightings, because we can go back and there's still living experts. Artie Six Killer is an author that I'd recommend for someone to read about contemporary accounts. But we get too much into this Indian graveyard theme where nobody knows where the story came from and there's no bother to really look into it. And there's just kind of a ripoff that's occurring into the culture that I can only say is sometimes kept intact because it hasn't been exposed to the mainstream audiences. And repeatedly, people will ask the questions, what do you know about any of these stories? And a lot of the elders just, they won't say anything. But if they trust you, and I've gotten to the level where people will tell me things, I tend to believe what they're saying without having to get them to sign witness affidavits and just interrogate them about what their sighting was. So there's a gray area there that I'm hoping to approach respectfully on the mainstream culture to say, do your best to give legitimacy to these stories and not just create panic that doesn't have a foundation in reality. And I feel strongly about it.
Very well said.
I think it's something we can reach towards without feeling that we're giving away our own culture, and they can coexist.
Right.
What's occurred and what hasn't been, scientifically proven. I think that the opportunity is there, but if we don't give it a chance, then we go down the road we may be heading down.
Sure.
Which leaves us with sort of empty tales, and they become things that don't have a lot of bearing on our lives in a modern sense.
Very well said, Chaz. Thanks for coming on tonight. It's been really a lot of fun. Very interesting. Alex, thank you so much for engineering again, making us look so pretty. Thank you, Alex.
It's been my pleasure, gentlemen. You have a great show, and it's going to grow to impressive magnitudes. I know
thank you, sir.
Week.
We appreciate that. We all really appreciate everyone that stopped in tonight to talk with us, populated that chat room, made a lot of fun. You guys keep this thing going, and we'll keep doing shows as long as you want to hear us doing shows. So we'll keep this stuff coming. Thanks a ton.
Thank you, Joel. If I can just give my email, anyone wants to contact
Absolutely.
me.
Tell us where they can get a hold of you.
cjkader@yahoo.com. That's CJKAD as in Delta ER @yahoo.com. I'm also on Facebook. I have a website that's going up. It's a mess right now, but that's ckader.com. And I've appeared on some episodes on YouTube, and you could see those on my channel, Northwoods with Chaz.
Very cool. Thanks again, Chaz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Take care. Take care of each other. Love each other. Hang out with each other.